Good morning. This is Haley Solomon with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us for this morning's housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. We're going to jump right into North Carolina Housing Coalition updates. This week, this Friday, we need you all to submit a nomination for our North Carolina Housing Coalition Awards. At our Affordable Housing Conference breakfast, we'll be recognizing organizations and individuals that have gone above and beyond the call of duty to advocate for affordable housing. Now, we're switching it up a little bit. You may have already heard about this in previous calls. We usually give out people-focused awards, but this year we wanted to feature work that people and organizations are doing around the state that is growing the housing movement in North Carolina. So if you or someone you know has really stood out and excelled in one of these areas, think about digital mobilization, advocacy events, public education efforts, grassroots mobilization, or cross-sector partnerships. Please submit a nomination. We'll have the link in the call notes for you to do so. And again, those are due by Friday, August 25th. We already have a few good ones coming in, so excited to see and hear about more great work happening around the state. Jumping into federal updates around input opportunities and advocacy opportunities. So this year is the 50th year of the American Housing Survey, or the AHS, a tool that we use quite often. And HUD is collecting feedback until September 20th of this year to ensure that the AHS data are as powerful and useful as possible for policymakers, researchers, industry leaders, and the public. They're pulling out two key aspects that they really want feedback on as well: oversamples and topic modules. If you're interested in feedback, we have the email that you can send your input to in the call notes. Next is a pretty big, I believe, advocacy opportunity, particularly one that connects the local level with the federal level. So many of you have heard us talk about the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act of 2023. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation that's been introduced in previous Congresses that aims to expand and strengthen our country's primary tool for developing and preserving affordable housing, LIHTC. So this particular piece of legislation this year was introduced 3 months ago and is still breaking records. The bill has 28 co-sponsors in the Senate, evenly divided between parties, and that represents more Senate Republican co-sponsors on the bill this year than there were in the previous Congress. And there are 159 co-sponsors in the House, also evenly split, but there's still a lot of opportunity for advocacy. So the Action Campaign, which is where we get a lot of our advocacy resources, is a great group where we are a part of one of their many members across the country. They would like support from local government leaders as well. So they're partnering with the National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties and Mayors and CEOs for U.S. housing investment on a letter from local government leaders to the leaders in Congress that underscores the importance of the legislation and emphasizes their support of this Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. This is one of those, I think, really rare and great moments to bridge what often feels like a quite distant relationship between federal legislation and local happenings. But we know that the low-income housing tax credit has had a huge impact here in North Carolina. Just some numbers for you. Just between 1986 and 2021, there have been over 100,000 homes developed or preserved in North Carolina using this tool. There's also been over $7.09 billion in tax revenue generated from the low-income housing tax credit alone. And those are just two of several different metrics that you can find on one of the fact sheets that they have on the impact of LIHTC in our state. And so if you're interested in participating in this, or you would like to get your local government leaders involved, we have a lot of different ways that you can do so listed in the call notes. I really encourage you all to reach out to your local government leaders to sign on in support of the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. The deadline for signatures is September 7th, 2023, and getting signatures is extremely easy. They're really great at this. They have virtual forms, digital forms that folks can sign. There was a similar effort in 2021 from U.S. mayors across the state, and I just want to point out that there are only 2 signatures from North Carolina, and I know that there are more than 2 mayors in our state that really value and support affordable housing, just like there are more than 2 local government leaders that value and support affordable housing. So the deadline for signatures is September 7th, so that's coming up. So please, please, please make sure that if you're interested in getting your local government leader support, that you start reaching out to them this week. If you or your local government leaders have any questions, you can email the Action Campaign directly at actioncampaign@enterprisecommunity.org. They also, and this will be in the call notes as well, have a few sort of just drafts that you can include on Twitter or on LinkedIn if you're a fan of social media and would like to promote this advocacy opportunity through those platforms. So again, I know there's more than 2 local government leaders that support this. Make sure that North Carolina can show up and we can show our support and emphasize how critical LIHTC is to our state and our communities. Next is federal updates. Senators are urging the Biden administration to include affordable housing and homeless assistance funding in the supplemental spending request. So a group of 14 Democratic senators that were led by Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, sent a letter to President Biden urging his administration to make sure that they include critically needed homeless assistance funding as part of its supplemental appropriations request. The letter really talks about the urgent need for robust funding for both affordable housing and homeless assistance programs, especially since the pandemic-era homeless prevention programs are ending or have ended, and other state and local homeless assistance resources are depleted and really stretched thin. Requests in the letter include $5 billion in new emergency housing vouchers, $580 million for the Emergency Solutions Grant program, and $1 billion for the National Housing Trust Fund. So we've provided a link to the letter there. As you all know, housing and community development programs, there's a lot at stake with the upcoming budget due to the spending cap deal. And so this is one of probably many letters that we'll see in trying to get housing and community development and emergency programs the funding that they need. Another input opportunity, last week the National Low-Income Housing Coalition announced that it joined the National Housing Law Project in submitting a letter in support of rural housing decoupling. Decoupling is essentially the separation of funding sources from another, so they're not interdependent. In order to support low-income rural residents and their access to rural housing that are provided specifically by the USDA through their Section 521 rental assistance programs and their Section 514 and 515 mortgages, decoupling these programs specifically would allow for project-based rental assistance to continue for multifamily housing tenants. And it would also open the door for new third-party investment and the recapitalization of the aging multifamily housing portfolio. Keeping these together could put the rental assistance at risk and possibly cause displacement. So there is a letter that the NLHIC has submitted in tandem with the National Housing Law Project, and we have that linked in the chat in the housing call notes. And the USDA also held several listening sessions about this topic, and the details can be found in the call notes link. There's a great summary about decoupling and the principles and thought process behind that. So make sure to check that out and keep an eye on it. In terms of state legislative updates, no new updates around the budget. Again, we're looking at a September timeline for votes as officials continue to negotiate and work through differences. It seems like a lot of the items that seem to be holding the budget up have not a lot to do with housing, except for, issues like Medicaid expansion. But there's also the matter of casinos, legalizing casinos, other project spending, and different infrastructure area investments. We also just want to point out that more than likely there will be sort of this flurry of legislation that people will try to pass towards the end of the session along with the budget. And how that will impact housing, we're still unsure, but we're going to do our best to kind of try and keep an eye on that. Last week, however, I do want to point out there were several veto overrides, and one in particular I think is a great example of a policy that could have a layered effect on housing and affordability. As you all probably know and can imagine, no policy is perfect. And so it's quite common that a policy can have both negative consequences and positive consequences, or potential in a positive way, but also negative consequences in a negative way. The bill that I'm talking about is House Bill 488 or Senate Bill 378, which is now Session Law 2023-108, and it's titled Code Council Reorganization and Various Code Amendments. This legislation, I think, is a great example of a bill that has mixed reviews, and one that could have this sort of combined positive and negative effect on our communities across the state that we really have to be mindful of and we have to watch. The potential for positive impact here is what I'll start with. With the passing of this legislation, North Carolina has become the first state to change its residential 1 to 2 family code to the 1 to 4 family code. And basically what that means is that when you use the commercial building code, oftentimes for residential, it increases building costs substantially compared to using the residential building costs, especially when it comes to 3 and 4 unit structures. So we're talking about triplexes and quadplexes. With this shift, there's potential that the construction cost of these types of housing, which we often see listed in the middle housing spectrum of housing types, this could decrease the construction costs for these types of housing. And so that is the positive potential that this legislation could have. Although this is a positive thing, it's really important that we don't ignore the other components of this bill that really create some concern. So what the bill also does is it delays the ongoing update of North Carolina's over 10-year-old building code. And what happens is the out-of-date nature of our code costs us money in several areas. It costs us access to federal mitigation dollars. And this includes more than $1.2 billion in the U.S. Department of Energy funding that's available to support energy code updates, as well as future mitigation and recovery dollars, which is scary considering the frequency in which we've had really powerful and devastating natural disasters in just the last 6 years alone. With the change and the consistency of extreme weather conditions, this could cost additional suffering, costs, and longer recovery times if our code is not able to update in the way it needs to, and the energy code updates are not there as well. And then this bill also creates a committee an extra committee that could hinder the existing Building Codes Council ability to make decisions and make the process for change even more arduous than it already is. We've linked a letter from the Builders Performance Association to Governor Cooper that was sent back in July that includes several state and federal partners' signatures and their concerns about the bill by clicking here. Again, just want to reiterate, this is a great example of how policy can be good and bad. No policy is perfect, but it's really important to keep an eye on what this could do for our community and make sure that we consider, especially as we're designing policy and we're evaluating policy, if the cons outweigh the pros. And so just keep an eye on this and remember to stay engaged around, I think, both of these issues, which both mean a lot for housing in our communities across the state. Moving on to local community updates, there are a lot. Councilman Hugh Holston was named the CEO of the Greensboro Housing Coalition last week. Holston has served on the board of directors for the Greensboro Housing Coalition since 2017 and was elected to the Greensboro City Council in July of 2022 and plans to remain in the position. There 2 major financial institutions have really kind of made significant or additional steps to invest in affordable housing in North Carolina. Ally Financial and Truist have both announced large investments in housing. Ally committed nearly $1 billion in giving and capital deployment to housing initiatives, particularly in Charlotte, to support affordable housing initiatives there. And this is not the first time that they've done so. And Truist has also announced a $17 million investment for affordable housing in Charlotte. And $15 million of that will go towards renovating older apartment complexes and transforming them into affordable housing. So really looking at the preservation side of things, and then the remaining $2 million will provide job training. Raleigh uses rent profits to fix up affordable housing. Last week, the Raleigh City Council approved allocating more than $300,000 to improve the city-owned affordable housing facility on Brentwood Road that they purchased in 2021. And this is part of now what is a hotel, now called Studios at 2800. It hosts 116 studio units, and the city plans to convert part of the rooms into permanent supportive housing for people with disabilities or exiting homelessness. And there are a lot of other great local updates around the state, but I want to list up a few of the resources, events, and things in the news that have stood out to us before I let you go. The National Locum Housing Coalition just released their summer issue, Tenant Talk Volume 14, Issue 2, Taking Pride into Our Work. This particular edition explores the efforts of LGBTQ plus individuals and how they continuously have to overcome housing discrimination and work to ensure access to safe and affordable homes for members of their community. A lot of great pieces in that volume. There's also a report out of the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard that compares the cost of manufactured and site-built housing. In terms of events, there are a few events, 2 in-person events actually happening in our state this week, at the Cape Fear Housing Coalition and Cape Fear Collective. So down towards the eastern part of the state, there's a housing map info session. If you haven't heard about the housing map info session, or the housing map project, is a really interesting tool that they're developing that kind of map out their housing and community resource ecosystem. So this is happening tomorrow, August 23rd, from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Harrelson Center, and it's free and open to the public. So the link to sign up for that is in our call notes. Also in person is a welcome reception for the new CEO of the Greensboro Housing Coalition, Hugh Holston, and that is also on August 24th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. In the news, just want to list up a few pieces, really 2 that stood out to me. There's a podcast from Next City that talks about how we stop discriminating against housing vouchers. And then we also, there's a pretty powerful piece in the New York Times that talks about how Gen Z can't afford the rent. So I'll leave it there. There's a lot of other great links in the call notes for you to check out. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to submit your nominations for Housing Awards by this Friday, and we'll see you next week.